From arrogant riders pulling mid-highway fakeouts to devastating daylight T-bone collisions, straight up to a 160-mile-per-hour ghost run footage. These are the moments when motorcycle chases got out of control. Trooper Tanner Seal was clocking afternoon traffic on US Highway 78 when a sport bike tore across his radar at 80 miles per hour. The guy hammered his brakes the moment he noticed the black and white cruiser, hoping a sudden drop in speed would magically erase the reading. That gamble didn't pay off, but a bulky white Camaro blindly merged right into the patrol car's exit path, handing the fleeing rider a massive head start. By the time the officer cleared the heavy obstruction, the biker abandoned his innocent act and twisted the grip wide open. The pursuit cut through the fading daylight, with the interceptor's lights painting the asphalt. But the suspect didn't rely on raw horsepower to escape. Instead, he dropped his velocity down to 35 miles per hour and aggressively swerved wall-to-wall across the lanes to trap the heavy Ford Explorer directly behind him. Without warning, he whipped a reckless U-turn dead in the center of the road and ripped the throttle back, launching himself west towards State Highway 38. Another unit caught the radio traffic and closed in fast, reading the biker's chaotic path like a book. Realizing the grid was completely locked down, the rider finally killed his momentum and coasted onto the gravel shoulder. He tried to play it off like a peaceful surrender, waiting for a polite conversation, but the adrenaline-fueled officers weren't having it. They swarmed the stationary bike with weapons leveled, loudly shouting for the suspect to eat the dirt and secure his hands behind his back. That little mid-highway fake-out earned him nothing but a mouthful of gravel and a rough ride to booking. An Arkansas state trooper was cruising through a quiet stretch of interstate when a rogue rider blew through the gap between two lanes at double the legal limit. Splitting traffic might be perfectly fine on the congested freeways of the West Coast, but pulling that maneuver down south guarantees an instant response. The officer immediately triggered his light bar, giving the guy a clear invitation to pull over safely. The suspect completely ignored the flash, tucked his head down, and absolutely buried the needle on his speedometer. The rider stretched his machine to an absurd 145 miles per hour, treating the public blacktop like a closed circuit. The trooper kept his foot firmly planted on the floorboard, skillfully maneuvering the heavy interceptor through civilian traffic while relaying the triple-digit speeds to dispatch. Camera footage captured the guy in denim in a red-accented helmet throwing the bike left and right, desperately trying to break the officer's line of sight. Up ahead, a backup unit heard the broadcast and parked his cruiser sideways across the concrete, effectively sealing off the only viable exit. Staring down a 2-ton barricade of police steel, the panicked rider made the catastrophic choice to ditch the pavement entirely. He jerked the handlebars toward the grassy median, betting his street tires could somehow handle the uneven terrain. The soft earth instantly swallowed his front wheel, violently bucking him off the leather seat and sending the chassis cartwheeling through the weeds. He slammed into the ground hard, finishing his felony flight, sitting battered in a massive cloud of kicked-up dirt while offering the arresting officers an entirely worthless apology. A standard nighttime speed trap on Interstate 675 escalated the second a lone motorcycle blew past the radar gun at 94 miles per hour. The posted limit was a strict 65, yet this guy treated the open lanes like a drag strip, completely unbothered by the highly visible patrol cars sitting on the shoulder. The officer flipped his overheads, anticipating a routine citation on the side of the road. The rider had other plans, pinning the throttle and instantly upgrading a basic traffic violation into a full-scale manhunt. He pushed his engine to a terrifying 128 miles per hour, aggressively slicing through the gaps between innocent drivers. Dashcam video recorded the sheer velocity as he threaded the needle past slow-moving commuters who never even saw him coming. Right when the pursuing cop assumed the suspect would keep running the long straightaway, the rider aggressively dumped his speed and dove for the Highway 138 eastbound ramp. He blasted straight through a solid red intersection at the bottom, missing a civilian bumper by absolute fractions of an inch. That final maneuver drained the very last drop of his luck, and units swarmed him the moment he finally parked the bike in the dark. A quick pat-down on the shoulder revealed a loaded handgun and 18 grams of weed shoved haphazardly into his pockets. To cap off the disastrous night, The motorcycle carried absolutely no insurance and sported a revoked license plate. He foolishly gambled a cheap speeding ticket and walked away facing a massive mountain of heavy felony charges. Late September dispatch channels flooded with terrified calls about a hostile rider actively brake-checking cars and flipping off families on Interstate 30. A trooper caught up to the chaos near mile marker 2, clocking the guy tearing through a highly restricted construction zone at nearly 80 miles per hour. The second the sirens cut through the air, the biker, later identified as David Rohr, dropped a gear and accepted the challenge. He didn't waste a single heartbeat before turning the active interstate into a highly volatile playground. Rohr rapidly pushed past the 100-mile-per-hour mark, throwing his unstable machine through tight traffic with terrifying precision. A second commanding officer jumped into the fray to coordinate a rolling roadblock, but Rohr's deeply unpredictable swerves made it impossible to pin him against the concrete barriers. The camera caught civilian vehicles scattering in panic as the heavy interceptors kept relentless pressure on his rear tire. The officers refused to give him an inch of breathing room, forcing him into making a split-second mistake. Running completely out of open asphalt, Rohr miscalculated a sweeping turn and launched his two-wheeler directly over a raised concrete median. The bike literally took flight before aggressively smashing into the grassy embankment, instantly shattering his hopes of a clean getaway. When troopers scrambled up the hill to secure him, they found a handgun tucked loosely in his waistband and noticed his eyes were completely glazed over. Rohr openly confessed he'd swallowed an unknown handful of narcotics earlier, perfectly explaining his total disconnect from physical reality. At 3 in the morning, the bright desert moon illuminated the totally empty roads of Maricopa, Arizona. A local patrolman was finishing a quiet shift when the deafening roar of a Kawasaki engine violently broke the silence. The rider, Demetrius Caddis, was violently fishtailing across the residential blacktop at 80 miles per hour in a sleepy 35 zone. The officer sparked his lights, but Caddis buried the needle, blowing through a blind intersection and missing a crossing vehicle by the thinnest of margins. The dashcam captured a frantic chase through the dark suburbs, transforming quiet neighborhoods into a neon-streaked blur of raw adrenaline. Caddis handled the powerful bike like a man operating purely on instinct, totally disregarding the heavy police presence actively closing the gap behind him. Dispatch channels lit up with chaotic updates as he pushed the lightweight frame far beyond its mechanical threshold. He was relying entirely on blind luck, actively betting his life against the heavy interceptor hunting him down in the dark. That reckless gamble failed miserably right before Hathaway Road when the front tire washed out on the cold pavement. The bike slammed down in a brutal shower of sparks, launching Caddis violently across the unyielding asphalt. The pursuing officer slammed his cruiser in park and sprinted toward the twisted wreckage, instantly calling for a bus the moment he saw the motionless body. The downed rider wasn't breathing, held a terribly weak pulse, and the unnatural twist of his neck confirmed a catastrophic spinal injury. An officer was monitoring a heavily congested commercial strip when a deeply suspicious, unregistered motorcycle caught his eye. The arrogant rider was blasting down the main drag without a helmet or a single piece of heavy leather, basically asking for law enforcement to intervene. The cop hit his strobes for a basic compliance check, figuring the unprotected guy would smartly pull over and take the minor fine. Instead, the biker completely ignored the flashing lights, cranked his right wrist, and ignited a wildly dangerous daylight run. The suspect rapidly gained speed, carving a terrifying path through the dense, slow-moving civilian traffic. The police camera recorded the sheer desperation as he tightly threaded his handlebars between terrified commuters who had zero time to react. He rode totally blind to the hazards waiting at the upcoming intersections, fixated entirely on outrunning the heavy cruiser in his mirrors. Just moments after the initial flight, he blitzed a multi-lane crossing at maximum velocity exactly as a bulky red pickup initiated a legal left turn. Without a fraction of a second to hit the brakes, he effectively turned his motorcycle into a high-speed missile. He slammed directly into the broadside of the truck, generating a deafening crunch of metal before his completely unprotected body vaulted across the intersection. The elderly pickup driver sat frozen inside his cab, physically uninjured but deeply shell-shocked by the sudden explosion against his passenger door. Medics managed to keep the mangled rider alive on the way to the trauma ward, but the horrific orthopedic damage ensured his riding days were permanently over. It ignited with a solo rider tearing down the dark highway with such extreme momentum that the dotted lane markers dissolved into a solid blur. A state trooper practically stood on his gas pedal, pushing his heavy interceptor past 150 miles per hour just to keep the taillight visible on the horizon. Even with a massive V8 roaring under the hood, the cop fought a losing battle against the bike's raw power-to-weight ratio. The overconfident suspect genuinely believed his elite acceleration made him totally untouchable by the law. He arrogantly held the throttle wide open, betting his entire life that the dark miles of asphalt ahead were completely empty. Reality brutally stepped in when he rapidly closed the gap on an oblivious civilian car just cruising in the center lane. The dash cam secured the horrifying exact moment the rider simply ran out of physical stopping distance while traveling at 135 miles per hour. There wasn't any shoulder to bail out on, no empty lane to take, and absolutely no way to rewrite the laws of physics. The front wheel buried itself directly into the rear bumper of the passenger car, detonating the motorcycle into a massive cloud of shredded plastic and sparks. The raw kinetic energy violently ejected the rider into the night air, leaving the ruined chassis completely destroyed on the interstate. In a twist that baffled every veteran responder on the scene, the battered suspect somehow survived the terminal velocity collision. Simply pulling breath into his lungs after absorbing a hit like that defied every shred of medical logic. A Kawasaki Ninja sliced through the dead of night, nearly blowing the doors off an Arkansas Interceptor with pure, terrifying speed. The stunned trooper barely registered the aggressive flyby before the sport bike was already a football field away and rapidly vanishing into the darkness. This wasn't a simple attempt to dodge a citation. The rider was putting on a clinic in high-speed evasion. He tucked his helmet securely behind the plastic windscreen and pushed his machine to an absolutely suicidal 155 miles per hour. The officer mashed the accelerator, but hunting down a tuned leader bike on a straight highway is functionally impossible in a 2-ton cruiser. The speeding Ninja kept darting violently between the sparse midnight traffic, easily dodging massive semi-trucks and clueless drivers. The police radio crackled as the trooper reported the climbing numbers, officially clocking the suspect at an unbelievable 160 miles per hour. At that extreme limit, a single pebble on the asphalt or a minor tire defect guaranteed instantaneous destruction. For several agonizing miles, the highly skilled fugitive effortlessly neutralized every single tactical maneuver the police threw at him. But raw velocity eventually collected its debt, and the bike inevitably lost traction, violently ejecting the rider into a devastating roadside tumble. Officers sprinted toward the mangled wreckage with their sidearms drawn, fiercely shouting commands for the downed suspect to show his hands. The aggressive orders echoed into the night unanswered, as the crumpled rider lay totally unresponsive with a shattered cervical spine and a failing heartbeat.